Welcome in to a Barnes on Bama live stream. Uh, just an absolutely insane game uh, for Alabama getting the win over Tennessee. You want to give people a few minutes here to join. Uh, Obviously, Alabama gets it by a score of 71-69. Labaron Philon, I see Brock already in the chat. Labaron Philon saying not losing to Tennessee in my last year. 100%. Right. And we'll talk about that as we kind of get into this. But this was really a situation where LeBaron Philon took over this game, knew that I'm going to take over and be the difference maker at the end of this game. As you said, Latrell Wright's a huge part of this game, 100%. Alabama doesn't have the ability to have LeBaron go off and win the game if Trelly doesn't have the threes and the consistency in this game to keep Alabama in it. Trelly seemed like the only guy that was consistently able to get his threes off. Um, it was kind of a situation where it felt like Trelly understood because he was one of the guys that had played against Tennessee. He understood what that physicality was going to take. And he was running to his spots. He was running to the corner. He was letting the ball meet him where he needed to be. And he also was understandably taking the shots a little quicker. I think Trelly knew coming into this game the release point had to be fast, right? Tennessee is there on the catch, or they're right after the catch at a minimum. And sometimes, like think about like a Taylor Bull Bowen. Obviously, I know he didn't take a ton of threes in this game, or even Aiden Sherrill. Those guys end up taking threes we see normally throughout the season, but they have to set up their shot, line up their fingers. It's a little bit more of a, they can absolutely hit them and they can hit them decently well, but the rhythm isn't quite there from the speed of which they can take them. That's one thing I wish I saw a little bit more out of Aiden Holloway. I thought that he had a couple of other opportunities to have potentially taken a couple of threes. But at the end of the day, Alabama took the shots that they needed to take. It was funny to me that Jimmy Dykes kept mentioning that Alabama wasn't on pace to take 35 threes. I mentioned that on the podcast as kind of a long shot. I thought that, Alabama, I believe they took like 26 or 27 in that first matchup, if I remember right. This was a situation where I thought they might get a couple of extra ones off having Aiden Holloway, but Tennessee historically has done a really good job building out to shooters against Alabama. They just don't allow you to get as many shots off as you normally would see Alabama get, right? Part of that's also that Tennessee, holds through every action. I know Joe Corona has been on Twitter kind of talking about it. There's a two-hand kind of shove on every action, whether you come around to cut or whatever. That's one reason why that I personally think that Tennessee struggles in March Madness, especially under Rick Barnes, because the officials in March Madness allow for some freedom of movement. They're not going to allow you to hold on every cut, to allow you to stop the action from being able to take place. And if you saw, there were plenty of moments in this game where Tennessee did just that. And Alabama, it's part of the reason why LeBaron, had to take over at the end of this game. It's because Alabama wasn't able to get into any actions, really. Tennessee was preventing our ability to get into actions. So it was really just LeBaron Philon getting switched onto the guy that he thought he could take one-on-one and then being able to take him one-on-one. Obviously, that last shot, that's a perfect example you can point to. His shot and Aiden Holloway's shot is like what you can point to if Nate Oates wants to be like, oh, y'all don't let my guys take mid range. Nate's just going to point to those two possessions and be like, you sure? Because at the end of the day, if it's the shot that you need to take, if that's the shot that you need to be able to win the game, you need to take that mid range shot with Aiden Holloway, or you need to take that mid range shot with LeBaron Philon. Nate Oates absolutely is more than capable of letting you do it. He just doesn't want that to be the only shot you're going for, because normally that's not the most efficient shot. But when you're having issues getting your shots blocked at the rim, when you're Tennessee Outlaws trying to have some fun, gotta love it. Um, but when you have a situation where Aiden Holloway is able to take the mid range shot because he's had a couple of shots get blocked at the rim, I thought that Jalen Carey did a really good job. I thought that Felix Akpara did a really good job. JP Estrella, they did a good job limiting what Alabama could do at the rim. And if you watch Nate Oates' press conference, Nate even talked about that as at the end of the day, if Tennessee wants to build out to limit your threes, you kind of got to go down low. You have to be a situation where you're going to have to go down low and have to contend with the big guys. And if they're going to stop you from going down low, you're going to have to shoot some threes. I felt like for a large stretch of this game, Tennessee did a pretty good job both building out and preventing the inside. I think that when Alabama was able to get out in transition, and you noticed Trelly did by far the best at this, get out in transition and run, it really allowed you to it really allowed us to get some open threes. And then when you also got out in transition, or sorry, when you also did that, it allowed you to not have your shots be blocked, obviously, because they don't have the set defense. Then when you saw Alabama needing a shot, if you're worried about your shot getting blocked at the rim, if you're worried about the three not being there, you have two guys in Aiden Holloway and Labaron Philon that wanted the ball in their hands, and they took the mid-range shot. They made the mid-range shot, and that's like a perfect example. All right, Tennessee Outlaw, you're getting put in timeout. Oh goodness. I swear. Some people can't handle a win on the road, I guess. Um but it's kind of a situation where I thought that Alabama did a really good job taking the mid-range shot when that's what they were given, right? And that's something that Alabama definitely has struggled with at times this season. I think that in years past it's something they've struggled with because I think that some players when you hear Nate Oates talk about take the efficient shot, they get in their head that means I can never take a mid range. But there are obviously situations, and Nate has talked about them, whether they be floaters in the lane, and I'm sure he's going to point to these. I bet somebody even asked him about him in the post game press conference. Obviously, recording this immediately after the game, not sure what all's being said in the post game presser. And it's a situation where Nate obviously wants you to just take the shot that's most available. And if you're getting your shot blocked at the rim, the mid range is the shot that's there. Another thing that I think that's really, really important that Nate's going to point to in this one is the fact that even though Alabama got absolutely killed on the glass, and obviously we need to talk about it because it was awful, Alabama's performance that they put up on the glass in this game. And I'm going to see if I can get the Ken Palm stats if it'll update. Looks like it has updated. Um, is Tennessee obviously killed Alabama on the offensive glass? Alabama just gets 63 possessions, which if you told me coming into this game, Alabama was going to win a game at 63 possessions, I probably would have told you were crazy. 63 possessions is just gross. Tennessee got 25 offensive rebounds to Alabama's 9. So Tennessee won the rebound battle by 1 on the defensive glass and by 16 on the offensive glass. Alabama got out rebounded by 17. Alabama also gave up 8 steals to Jacoby Gillespie. Wait, he had 8 steals in this. Gillespie had 8 steals. Tennessee had 9 of them in this game. Tennessee had 3 guys with 5 offensive rebounds apiece. In Okpara, Amari Evans, and JP Estrella, but Alabama still gets the win in this game. And I think a lot of that had to do with clutch free throw shooting. Labaron Philon, Latrell Reitzel, Aiden Sherrill, they combined to only miss 2 free throws. Aiden Sherrill obviously goes perfect. I'm sure Aiden Sherrill won the hard hat. I've not seen an official come out, but he had 4 blocks. He had a steal. He led the team in rebounds. He fought his absolute ass off the whole game. If he didn't win the hard hat, then why do you have the award? This was a situation where, Aiden Sherrill played 33 minutes. And what I want you to understand about those 33 minutes is that is not 33 minutes like you played against Arkansas, like where he ended up playing, a crazy amount of minutes. This was a situation where he played 33 just absolute physical beat each other up type minutes. So the fact that he was able to get 33 minutes in a game of this caliber is just insane. Props to Aiden Sherrill. You have 0 chance in this game if he does not play where he can defend without fouling. He only has 2 fouls in this game. I thought he did a really good job about going straight up. And Hard, I see your comment about the middle school game. I'll get to it in just a second. If y'all have any other questions, just go ahead and throw them down in the bottom. And I'll get to those here in a minute. Just want to finish up my thought currently. But Aiden Sherrill, I thought that what he was able to do in defending without fouling, with going straight up, at times Alabama tried to run a little bit of offense through him. Some people are going to point to the fact that his offense wasn't great. He only went 1 of 5 from inside the arc, 0 of 1 from outside the arc. I don't care. The 4 blocks, the 8 defensive rebounds, the boxing out there at the end of the game, the physicality that he provided, I thought was just absolutely incredible. Would you love to see him finish a little bit better at the rim? Sure. But at the end of the day, right, like what he was able to give you in those 33 minutes, you're absolutely happy with. Because some nights just aren't going to be his night from a scoring perspective. His development this year has been incredible, 100%, right? Like Alabama's nowhere near where they are today if it's not for Aiden Sherrill, right? You think about obviously people are going to point to this game, not his best scoring game. He only goes 6 of 7 or 6 and 7, but or sorry, 6 and 8, but was a huge deal in this game. Last game he goes 11 and 6. The game before that he goes 12 and 10. The game before that against Arkansas, he plays 39 minutes with a double-double, 26 and 13. Aiden Sherrill has really been on a tear here these last few games, and he's been a huge reason why Alabama has been able to do what they've been able to do. Because obviously we've talked plenty on this show about what Noah Williamson is and hasn't been. I will say, to his credit, Noah had 2 offensive rebounds in this game, and I thought he had a steal. The official box score doesn't credit him with one, but I thought he did get one. I didn't think Noah was terrible. Obviously, his defense just isn't as good as it needs to be, and Alabama had to play Aiden Sherrill. There's no two ways around it. Like I thought at times against JP Estrella, Noah was okay. The problem was his box outs, right? Like he did get 2 offensive rebounds helping us on the other end, but his box outs on the defensive glass were just atrocious. And I think that there were 1 or 2 possessions that he was in that they got 3 possessions because of multiple offensive rebounds. So I think that had as much to do with obviously Noah being out of this one as anything. But I don't think that this is by far not his worst game I've ever seen, which says a lot given the fact of what you have. Obviously, we knew that Taylor Bull-Bowen likely wasn't going to have a huge impact on this game. You hoped he would have a little bit more of one, but Taylor Bull-Bowen is just not big enough from a physicality standpoint to match up with the size that Tennessee has. Tennessee has an insane amount of size in that front court, and Taylor, obviously the thing that we talk about here on the show that's my favorite quote I've ever heard. One of the announcers in the preseason said he's built like a blade of grass. Taylor is, has the height, has the athleticism, has the skill, but does not have the physical size, right? Doesn't have the weight to be able to push around those type guys. And I thought that he just struggled pretty mightily on the glass in this game. He ended up only getting 1 defensive rebound in 14 minutes. Houston Millette shows you that doesn't matter how big you are, doesn't matter how tall you are. He plays 19 minutes, gets 5 rebounds, including 2 offensive, consistently gives you exactly what you need from him. And CL Hart, first half reminded me of a middle school girls game, throw the ball up, and then everybody crowds under the basket and takes turn grabbing it and throwing it at the rim. Yeah, right. Like this was a situation where Alabama just could not stop them from doing anything on the glass. 16 offensive rebounds in the first half is just gross. Alabama obviously had no business being in this game for the amount of time that they were. And when you look at kind of what the box score looks like, Alabama gets off just 27 shots from 3. Alabama hits 10 of them. Obviously, Trelly going 6 for 9 is a huge deal. Aiden Holloway goes 2 for 2. I'm sure Nate's going to point out that you wish you would have gotten Aiden a couple of more shots. Again, I thought that he had a couple more that he just didn't take. I thought his trigger needed to be a little quicker on the release on those, but did not take those shots. But there's, 8 of your 11, or 8 for 11 from 3 between those 2 guys. You add another one with Houston and Labaron. I thought that that was a big deal. I thought that when you look at what Tennessee, like what they struggled with, the only reason Tennessee's really in this game at all is because of their rebounding. This Tennessee team today reminded me of Buzz Williams's A&M teams because Tennessee ends up going 43% from 2 and 22% from 3. Just absolutely atrocious shooting splits. Jacoby Gillespie scores 26 points on 23 attempts, and Jalen Carey scores 10 points on 11 attempts. Even JP Estrella scores 12 points on 13 attempts, right? Like everything was just, yes, they got points, but they had to have just as many shots as they had points on just about every person on the team. Of course, people are going to point to the fact that Nate Ament got hurt in this game, did not play for a large stretch of this game. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you would be crazy not to talk about that. I think that that's a big deal. I think that that definitely needs to be discussed. The fact that that Nate Ament did not play in this game. I think that Tennessee potentially has a little bit more. Obviously, if you're playing Ament, I think that it changes your rebounding a little bit because of what it felt like Tennessee went more all in on the on the offensive rebounding with a Mint out of this game, where they were playing Okpara and Estrella together, or they were playing Okpara and Dwayne Brown together. Obviously, Jalen Carey's in there a ton, anyways. It felt like they changed up their philosophy a little bit after a Mint went out, of course. Um, so I think that the offensive rebounding, when you look at what Tennessee did on the offensive glass in Tuscaloosa, they got 14 offensive rebounds in Tuscaloosa. The big difference is Ament played that whole game. Obviously, Alabama also could go two bigs in that game because they had Bediako. So I'm sure that both of those things mattered. But I look at it as the fact that Nate Ament didn't play in this game. I thought that Alabama generally did a pretty good job of him on defense in the time that he did play. He played 11 minutes. He got 5 shots. He made just one of them. I thought that in general, having Amari Allen was the impact that I thought it might be. Obviously, Alabama also had Houston Millett on him. There was a bunch of different guys that guarded him in, but I thought that in general, we did a much better job in the time he was on the floor. But I would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that he did get hurt in this game. I hope that he's healthy. I hope that it's nothing major. I will say somebody 6'11" probably shouldn't be able to bend like that. So I'm of the mindset he probably strained something in his knee, because I have no idea how there was even a sense that he was going to be able to play in that second half, because that was a really scary situation. So obviously, hope the best for him and his kind of future career. Brock asking a great question. 8 straight wins. What has changed with this team? I think there's a few things that changed with this team. I think that when you look at what happened, first and foremost, you can point to the fact that that Florida game, Alabama got embarrassed. I think that that Florida game, obviously, this is more of kind of what you've seen out of Florida, what you've seen Florida against Alabama the last few years. Alabama struggles with that physicality in the front court. And then when Florida was able to compare it or add it with the guards that were able to pressure the ball, I think that's a really big deal for how Florida was able to dominate us. But I think that that was kind of the wake up call, because at that point, Alabama's 4-4 in conference. And Nate points to his team and says, "Hey, did you come here to be 500 in conference?" You know, because when Alabama loses to Vandy, you can obviously kind of shrug your shoulders and say Labaron Philon didn't play in the second half. Aiden Sherrill didn't play at all. The fact that Alabama could even kind of play in this game is a big deal, right? Especially with the number of free throws that got shot in that game. There was a lot of things that happened in that Vandy game, but losing to Vandy is what it is. The Texas game you're upset about, right? The Texas game, especially when it happened, you dropped to 1-2 in conference, and you don't know that Texas is going to be sitting at 9-7 currently. Texas was a team that really was expected to be a little bit lower in the conference. So the fact that you get that loss, and especially on your home floor, that's one that's hard to shake. The Tennessee loss, I think the reason why that one hurts more is obviously having Bediako. But I think that if you're a realistic Alabama fan, you can look to the fact that you didn't have Amari, didn't have Aiden Holloway. So I think that there was potentially, and I don't want to say some coat, but there was some situation where you could kind of be like, okay, it just is what it is. 6-point loss, don't love to see it, but it happens. And then the Florida loss, again, it kind of happens. I think that what turned the corner is a few things. One, the schedule was a little easier, right? Like A&M, Auburn. If you're looking at the good teams that you've beat, kind of the top 40-ish KenPom teams you've beaten in this stretch, A&M and Auburn are two of the better ones. Auburn obviously has struggled in conference. They've won just one of their last six, one of their last seven. Currently sitting at 6-9 in conference. So A&M currently very much struggling. I think they're two of their last eight. So that's two teams that Alabama, I think, got at times where Alabama needed a big win and those other teams were kind of going in the wrong direction, so to speak. Then the win against Ole Miss, the win against South Carolina, LSU, Mississippi State, I don't really count those as like us doing anything different. If Alabama lost those games, I would be way more concerned. That Arkansas game, I think, was really just finding a way to win. Obviously, Arkansas gives a great punch in the first half. Alabama great counter in the second, and then it's really just outlasting with more guys. Arkansas fans will point to the fact that Arkansas had to foul out of that game. I'm going to point to the fact that don't have 7 scholarship guys. That's your problem, not mine. If you only have 7 scholarship guys because Calipari only wants 7 scholarship guys, then there's going to be some games where multiple people foul out because you're in double overtime, and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. Right? Like Alabama has 10 guys. We have 3 guys currently not playing right now because of that aren't playing at all because of medical issues. Right. Davion Hanna, Keaton Bristow, and Collins Onjiaka currently are not playing because of medical issues. So, Alabama, has 13 guys, but they're still only playing 10. The fact that you only have 8 scholarship guys for Arkansas, Carter Knox is out, and now you're like, oh, I only had 7 guys. Well, you only have 8 when everyone's healthy. That's your fault. Right. Like, you can't come to me and get mad at me when that. So like I completely kind of disagree with that sentiment. But I think that if the real question is like what's changed, is I think it's just a sense of urgency, a sense of hey, we're 4-4 and you got to be better. That we can't win this game. I also think that Labaron Philon, at times did exactly what he did in the game today and said, I'm not losing this game. Right? Like the Arkansas game really was Philon versus Darius Acuff for moments because Darius Acuff would hit a big shot and LeBaron Philon's like, okay, like I got one too. Now, it wasn't LeBaron trying to outscore Acuff, but it was him kind of just putting the team on his back and being like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to take the big matchup on defense. I'm going to, get to the ball where I need to be on offense. Like whatever it meant to be. I think that's what I think that's what LeBaron Philon did. And I think that having a leader that is willing to play defense is a huge deal. Hart's also said, LD Hart, Bama being healthy the next 2 weeks is going to help chemistry. Yeah. I think that something like that's also something you have to point to. When you look at some of the games that Alabama starts to do a little better, Latrell Wrightsell comes back. So he was out in the Texas, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma games. His first game back was the Tennessee game that first time. Didn't play great, didn't play terrible. Obviously shot really well against Missouri, was okay against Florida, not the best, and then really has done really, really well since then. I think that you really also have to look at the fact that like Aiden Holloway hurt his wrist and was playing through some injury. Like he did not play at all in that Tennessee game. A guy like Amari Allen doesn't play against Tennessee or Missouri. And then Florida is his first game back. He has 3 turnovers in the game, fouls out in just 22 minutes. I think that you can look to a guy like Amari Allen. He's a really, really good player. And the fact that Alabama, his first game back in the uniform after injury was that Florida game. That's maybe not the best game to get somebody back in. Obviously, you'd love to have him, but you wish that he was a little bit more up to game speed, up to practice speed. I think there's a lot of points like that you can also point to is injuries have definitely plagued this team in a large part for a large stretch of the season. I know that me and Joe Gaither talked about it Friday. Is that injuries have been a major part of this team. And the fact that Alabama is getting guys healthy at the right time, I think is a big reason why they've been able to kind of sustain the success to this point. I think there's a lot of things that they've done well. Obviously, this is a win in Knoxville, a place you haven't won since 2021, but it still wasn't a good game, right? Like Alabama still, gave up 25 offensive rebounds. Like Nate's going to hang that on a whiteboard in Coleman Coliseum, like in the practice facility. He's going to hang 21 offensive rebounds. You just can't do that, right? Like, granted, you won the game. You found a way to win the game. You can't give up 25 offensive rebounds. So, I mean, there's plenty of things you can point to positively in this game. But I think that at the end of the day, it's survive and advance. And what this does is this locks up a top 4 seed in the SEC, which is a huge deal because you got the tiebreaker over Arkansas. So this locks up the top 4 in the SEC. This also just gets you to a point where Alabama likely is. I think Lenardi has us as the top 4 seed in March Madness. You're on that line of if you win some games in the SEC if you win out, finish 14-4 and win some games in the SEC, then you potentially are going to be a 3 seed, a lower 3 seed. If not, you're potentially just a 4 seed and you're in that 4-13 matchup. I think either one is completely fine. This whole time I've kind of said that 3 to 6 is kind of the range you were going to be in. This win against Tennessee really gives you that ability to be that 3 seed. I think with a loss today, you probably are guaranteed a 4 seed. But the fact that you won definitely gives you the ability to be a 3 seed. Realistically, I think to be a 3 seed, you're probably going to have to make it to Championship Sunday in the SEC tournament. I will also say the fact that Alabama likely is going to be a 2 or a 3 seed in the SEC tournament also very much helps you, because what it means is you're not going to get Florida until at latest the championship game. So you potentially could beat 2 teams before you play Florida, and then it to a degree doesn't matter if you beat Florida. You beat Florida, great. You win the SEC tournament. If you lose to Florida, oh well. You may still get a 3 seed. So I think that at a certain point, this win just means so much for kind of the future of this season, because it allows you to get to where you still want to be from a top four of the SEC standpoint. And additionally, may even allow you to get to that, 3 seed of March Madness. But even if you're a 4 seed, you're going to be a top 4 seed. And I think that you're going to be very, very well set up for what you need to be and kind of beyond. So I'm super happy with what happened today, obviously. What other questions do you guys have? I know there's quite a few people in the chat. We have over 106 people watching across the multiple platforms. Whatever platform you're on, if you'll just throw a comment, really would appreciate it. Yeah, you're 100% right, Hart. A 3 seed would help us avoid those number 1 seeds until the Elite Eight, and getting Florida in the conference finals helps to depth. 100%. Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, Alabama had to face North Carolina, which was that 1 seed in our Final Four run in Los Angeles back a couple of years ago. I was in attendance for that game, but yeah, the 1 seeds this year are pretty scary. Honestly, the only 1 seed that I feel like is possibly gettable is maybe UConn. I think that Michigan, Arizona, and Duke are not teams that I would want to face in the Sweet 16. Um, I'd much rather have to face them in the Elite Eight at least. Those are not teams that I want to have a full week to prepare for me, because that's the big thing that you also have to think about when you're looking at these teams is with the way that March Madness goes. With the way March Madness goes, the teams that you're going to face in the Sweet 16 are going to have basically an entire week to prepare for you. And then the teams that are going to face you in the Elite Eight only have 2 days to prepare. So I'd much rather have to face like a Michigan or an Arizona or somebody on 2 days to prepare instead of a week to prepare. Personally, right? Obviously, I'd prefer not to face them at all, but realistically, you're going to have to beat a really good team in March if you want to win. Shout out to Tony. For those of you who don't know, I sit next to Tony in Coleman Coliseum. He is on a road trip kind of across the country, but he will be back for the Auburn game. So I will see you in Coleman next Saturday, Tony. Um, but yeah, I mean, just a huge win by Alabama in this one. I thought that this has been just such a big deal for Alabama to get kind of the monkey off their back of beating Rick Barnes. I think that it also allows you to understand what Nate Oates has said time and time and time again. You just have to find a way to win. Doesn't matter what goes right or what goes wrong in your game. You have to find a way to fight to the win. And I think that you can point to this game about maybe Alabama feels like there's plenty of fouls that should have been called that weren't. The fact that an Alabama Tennessee game only was called for 25 fouls is laughable. Tennessee was called for 15 fouls, Alabama was called for 10. There could have been triple that and it wouldn't have shocked me. So the fact that there were that few of foul calls in this game, I think is pretty funny to me. So the fact, Alabama could point to that as like, hey, we were restricted our movement. Labaron and Aiden and Houston and these guys aren't able to make their cuts because they were being held. Sure. Yeah. But that doesn't matter. If they're not blowing the whistle, they're not blowing the whistle. You still just got to win the game, right? Like you got to do whatever the officials are doing, whether they're blowing it a ton like they did in the Vandy game, whether they're not blowing it a ton like they did in this game where they're swallowing the whistle. You just got to win the game. And I think it's a situation where I think that the resiliency of this team to be able to fight back, having 28 points in that first half, it really felt like Alabama was just going to roll over and let them win. It felt like, oh, this is another game in Knoxville. We've seen this story script again. Honestly, kind of similar to the Florida game in Gainesville. You saw Florida get out to a huge win, and you were hoping they could give the fight, and they just never did. Florida just runs away with the game, uh, largely based on Alabama turnovers. And I thought that Alabama did a better job not turning over the basketball in the second half. I thought Alabama did a much better job handling the physicality in the second half. I thought that Alabama got out running a little bit more in the second half, which allows you to set up your offense and get your shooters in transition, whether it be Aiden Holloway, Latrell Reitzel. Again, you saw those guys. We talked about it up at the top. Those guys were 8 of 11 from three. Those two guys combined. They shoot well in transition. Trelly had plenty of moments where the pass got to him and he just had to go straight up. There's no thought, no anything. You got to go up with it right that second because that's the only second you have. And I thought that they did a really good job. They weren't pressing, but like breaking the press, so to speak. And I thought that was a big deal. What other questions you guys got? I know there's a lot of people in here. If y'all are not subscribed to the channel, on YouTube, don't follow me on Twitter. If you could drop me a follow, a subscribe, I would appreciate it. As you see down below, I'm a part of the Believe Podcast Network. So if y'all listen to the show, any ads y'all hear, that's because I am a part of that network. I would appreciate it. I will say this game, to a degree, this game felt like a Tennessee-Alabama game, right? So to a degree, it felt like what I expected it to be. I thought that Alabama was going to handle the physicality a little better. I thought that more of what I saw in the second half is what I thought might happen in the first game. Might have happened in the first half, I guess I should say. Because I predicted the 82-75. I thought that Alabama maybe would have handled the pressure a little bit better or the physicality a little better. I thought that Tennessee also just like them getting the offensive rebounds, the amount of times they did also slowed the game down so much that's part of the reason why the game just felt like it did. How far do you see Alabama going in March? So I will say with this one, I am probably going to do a live stream the day that the bracket is released. And we're going to talk through kind of what I see as Alabama's path. That's going to happen on Sunday, the 15th. My fiance is going to be out of town, so I should have that afternoon. And I can kind of sit down. We'll go through what I think is going to happen. The big thing I would think is I think that Alabama, like Hart said, a 3 seed would help us avoid the 1 seeds. I think realistically, this team is obviously you should expect to win that first game. Will it be hard? Potentially, right? Especially if you're on that 4-12 line, or sorry, a 4-13 line, there's some good 13 seeds. Right? Like Alabama needs to prepare like that team can beat you, but I think that Alabama should expect to win that game. Then I think that going to that next game, I think that Alabama realistically should be able to win that second game. One thing that you'll notice that Alabama has generally done in the second games in our tournament runs is Nate Oates has been super successful when he wins that first game to win the second. Alabama is a super hard scout, especially on one day, right? Like when you're playing Thursday, Saturday, and you've only got Friday to put in what our offense does. People don't play like Alabama does, right? Like obviously Tennessee and Auburn and some of these like Rick Barnes has a philosophy to be able to okay. Sorry about that. Alabama has been able to win. Like the only game or the only season in which we lost that first round was when JQ got hurt in 2022. JQ gets hurt, Alabama loses to Notre Dame. Every other game that Nate Oates has won that first one, he's won the second. He's made it to the Sweet 16. I think it's just because it's a really hard scout on one day. So I think Sweet 16 is very realistic. If you're talking about can we get to the Elite Eight or Final Four, are we capable? Absolutely. Will we? We will have to see. The best thing that I point to, and our front court depth is something that I have pointed out, as has everyone else. And I think that people point out the fact that Alabama struggles in the front court, and really we're running Aiden Sherrill out there, and our backup 5 is kind of useless at times. At times he's okay, at times he's useless. The thing that I have to point to is when you go to 2024, so the year that Alabama made the NCAA tournament, there's a couple of things that are true about that team. One, and first and foremost, that team's defense was ranked 111th in the country. Our defense is currently ranked 61st. Granted, that team's defense played much better during March. My point is, as long as Alabama can lock in on the defensive level, they can still get there, right? It's not like you have to be a top 10 defense to be able to make a Final Four, but you do need to play like a top 30, top 40 defense, right? So Alabama does need to lock in on that defensive end. Additionally, something you also need to look to is Alabama was really running Nick Pringle and Grant Nelson at the four, or sorry, at the five, that run, because Muhammad Wagee was averaging 10 fouls per 40 minutes. So in the North Carolina game, that's like the game that kind of everyone can point to is like, oh, you're going up against RJ Davis. You're going up against a huge, or sorry, not RJ Davis. You're going up against Armando Bacot. You need a big. Nick Pringle played 20 minutes. Grant Nelson played 36 minutes. Muhammad Wagee played 2, right? So as long as Aiden Sherrill could potentially give us, 30 minutes like he did tonight, maybe if we have to call some extra timeouts, maybe he gives us a little more than that. Anytime that they're big, if you're not playing a team like Tennessee that has like 5 bigs, you can take him off the floor and you potentially run Taylor Bull Bowen at the 5. Maybe you run Noah sparingly at the 5. I think that Alabama has the ability to beat a team like that. The question just becomes like, who are you going up against? And I think that's the situation that you really have to look at when you're looking at March Madness. I think realistically, Sweet 16, I don't want to say should be absolutely expected, but like my expectation is a Sweet 16 minimum. I think that realistically, if you get a 3 seed and you avoid those ones for the Sweet 16 matchup, could you see a 1 getting upset in the Sweet 16 and Alabama potentially knocking off like a 4? Sure. Could you see Alabama being able to beat a 1 on short rest? Sure. Right. Like I think it's absolutely possible because the team that just scored 28 points in the first half against Tennessee also scored 63 in the first half against Mississippi State, right? Like Alabama has an ability to score with anybody in the country. And that's something that I think that you have to understand what you're looking at. Yeah. I mean, the the crazy part is the backup 5 this year, responding to Shiro, the backup 5 this year is still averaging less fouls per 40 than Muhammad Wagee did the year he played against or played for Alabama, right? Wagee was substantially better from inside the arc. He was 36 of 56 for the season. He gave us a little something. He also was a good offensive rebound. He was averaging like 17% rebound rate. Whereas this season, Alabama's backup, obviously, we're referring to Noah Williamson currently. Williamson is only about an 8% offensive rebound rate, 9% defensive rebound rate, which is just not very good. And he's 8 of 16 from inside the arc. He obviously does not really score hardly at all. And I think that that's really what you kind of have to look to is Alabama still had minimal impact on the in the front court on that Final Four run, right? Now, the big difference maker, however, and I would be remiss if I don't point this out, was the fact that you had Grant Nelson that could play your small ball 5. He was your 4 that you could move to the 5 because he did it a ton that season. And moving Grant Nelson to the 5 really allowed you to do so much more with that team. Because remember, that team was built kind of expecting to have Bediako back. You expected to have Nick Pringle be your backup, Bediako be your starter, and then Grant Nelson could play his true position at the 4, but that's a whole different discussion for a whole different day. Um, what other questions do you guys have? I know there's a lot of people in here. That was a good one about March, though, Woods. Kind of my thoughts looking forward. Obviously, Alabama takes on Georgia tomorrow. Alabama takes on Georgia tomorrow night, or sorry, Tuesday night. On the road. Georgia got a big win against South Carolina this morning by 87-86. When you look at Georgia, they're a team that plays super fast. They do a really bad job offensive rebounding the basketball. If you think Alabama's a bad offensive rebounding team, Georgia's somehow even worse. Alabama's currently 297. Georgia's currently 347. So obviously, Georgia definitely struggles preventing the offensive glass. So expect that to be pretty big on kind of both sides of this game. Expect that this game is going to be super fast paced. Georgia currently 22nd in the country in tempo and 12th in their offensive tempo, whereas Alabama's 7th. So I would expect that possession number gets up into the high 80s, or sorry, high 70s. If you get up to 80, wouldn't even shock me. I think it's going to be a situation where Georgia is going to try to shoot with Alabama. I think that they're going to try to stop Alabama from getting to the getting their shots off the 3-point line, obviously. But my thing is with the speed that Georgia plays with, I don't think that they're going to be able to limit Alabama's 3-point shots, right? Tennessee has an ability to play physical and to limit Alabama's 3-point shots. I don't think that Georgia is going to have that same ability. My gut says what Georgia's going to try to do is try to limit the 3-point shots and funnel everybody into Santos Surreal. He's currently 10th in the country in blocks. He's currently 4th in the country in 2-point rate, or sorry, 2-point percentage. He's been elite this season. He's been a really, really good big man. I think that they're going to try to force everything down onto him. I think that that's what this game is going to turn into. However, I do think that when you're looking at what Alabama does and the speed they play with, for me, it's very difficult to see how they're going to be able to um, keep up the pace with a team like Alabama. I think that when you look at what teams Alabama has struggled with historically, it's hardly ever been a team that runs because it's almost like you go fast, we go faster, and our conditioning is more than ready for what you're going for. And I think additionally, you're also looking at a situation of even if you're going to try to run us off the 3-point line, it hardly ever works when you're playing at that pace because you're going to lose somebody with all the actions that Alabama runs. Who draws the defensive assignment on Blue Cane? Let me look. So if we look at like Georgia's current starters, this last game they started Blue Cane at the 2. They start Millender at the 1. They start Blue Cane at the 2. My gut would say that that's probably going to be a Labaron Philon matchup to start the game and a Latrell Wrightsville Houston Millette matchup for large stretches of the game. And then if he potentially gets going where he's getting a decent number of points, and he's had some games this season where he got going, it wouldn't shock me if we throw like Amari Allen on him. But I look at that as like a Latrell Wrightsville Houston Millette type matchup. But LeBaron Philon, I think, will draw that matchup at times. I think that you'll probably just leave Aiden Holloway on Millender if I was guessing. Got to hit the center hard in the transfer portal to help Sherelle. Yeah, so I think that when you look at what Alabama has struggled with in the transfer portal, I think that you have to kind of look at a situation where you have to understand that Alabama has gone after some big centers. I think that Alabama consistently has tried to get some bigger name centers. I think that at times you have to understand what ends up happening, right? So let's go from 2023 till now, right? 2023, 2024, you assume that Charles Bediako is going to be back. He pulls his name at the last minute. You're kind of stuck with having to get Wagee because he's the only guy left. You don't love to see that. The next year, you got Cliff Amore. I think that Cliff Amore was good. I think that some people thought he would be better, but I think that he was good for what you needed. I think that some people just wished he had a little bit more to his game. but overall, Cliff was what he was. This year, I think it's a situation of, I'm just going to put it bluntly, Noah Williamson has not been what you thought he was going to be. Hart just said it 100% true right here. Williamson was brought in to run two bigs on some matchups, and Onjiaka was going to be a backup big body center. I would maybe disagree with the idea that Onjiaka was going to be a backup big body. I know Nate mentioned it. I think that if he was going to play, he was going to play in like the Florida and Tennessee games, and that's about it. I thought that Onjiaka was not really going to play a whole lot this season. I thought he was going to be like a pseudo red shirt. I was pretty open about that fact. I thought that he was more of just a body. Maybe he played in a couple of games, but I did not think he was going to be a guy who played a ton. But I do think that realistically, Williamson was the top scorer in his league. Williamson won the Patriot League Player of the Year. He was a guy who averaged 17 points and like 7 rebounds last season. He was a guy who was shooting about 31% from three. He was a guy who you thought at times you could run as a center with Aiden Sherrill, right? Again, when you go to like the KenPom numbers, last season, Noah Williamson was a 25%. So let's just, his first year at Bucknell, he was a 22% defensive rebounder. His second year at Bucknell in 2024, he's a 20% defensive rebounder. Last year at Bucknell, he's a 25% rebound rate, defensive rebounder. This season, he's currently 9.9%, right? So he has been 20+% defensive rebounder every single season at Bucknell. He's currently 9.9 at Alabama, right? So I think it's just a standpoint of what he was good at Bucknell. He has not been good at Alabama, right? He was great at drawing fouls last season. He drew like 7 fouls per 40 minutes, which was like 11th in the country. He had a free throw rate top 40, right? There are all these things that he was really good at last season. He's just not been good at Alabama. Now, I think that that's obviously like a step up in competition and the pace we play with. I think there's a lot of reasons. I don't think that's Noah Williamson particularly just being bad. I think that there's a lot of things that play into that, right? And maybe there's some mental to it. Maybe there's there's plenty of things I think that go into that. But I think that there is a situation that you just need to understand that like Alabama thought that they were getting another big that was a 25% defensive rebounder that could go alongside Aiden Sherrill. In moments, they could run two bigs, and in other moments, they would just swap them out and run one big, Noah for Aiden. And clearly that was not the case, right? Clearly that did not work out. So I think that there's going to be some looking in the mirror. And I think that what this is going to be is this is going to be kind of a perfect situation of when you saw what Alabama did at the guard wing position after Latrell Wrightsell was hurt in that Final Four run. In my mind, what you saw was Alabama going after guys like Houston Millett and others where you were going to have multiple guard wings where if you had an injury, it was going to be okay, right? Perfect example is this season, you have so many guys in the backcourt that you have had one guy injured, it feels like every game almost all season, and you've still been able to withstand it because you had a bunch of guys. I think that you didn't have that when you looked at what happened in that Final Four run because you really only could play Mark Sears and Aaron Estrada when Latrell Wrightsell was hurt. When he had the concussion, you only had 3 guys. So then you only had 2 guys. Aaron Estrada and Mark Sears are running almost 40 minutes. I think that Alabama did what they needed to do to get better in that offseason. I think that this offseason will be a perfect example of Nate understanding, hey, I need some options, whether that be a guy that's going to play the 4 that can go down to the 5, like a Grant Nelson did, whether that means you're going to have another center that you're just going to have that is not really going to be a starter. That's not even going to be a huge minutes guy, but you just need to have a true backup to the backup. Okay. Right. Like I think that there's going to be something like that I would expect to see Nate Oates go after in this offseason, or Preston Murphy, I guess, go after in this offseason to be able to help Alabama kind of moving forward. Because I think that's what Alabama is currently missing is what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if somebody doesn't work out? What happens if somebody's hurt? I think that's where the big question mark is currently with this team. Yeah. Georgia's another quad 1 opportunity. Got Thomas in here. Georgia's another quad 1 opportunity. Win this, and I think a 3 seed's becoming more likely. Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. I think that, they said that this gets you up to likely the top 4 seed, and I think that if you can get a win on the road at Georgia, get the win at home against Auburn, win on on Friday in the SEC tournament, and then I think the Saturday game likely is for a 3 seed. Potentially, you already have it locked up if you win the next 3, but, if you win the next 4, I think that you have locked up a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament personally. I think that you got to win the next 4 games to have it locked up. You win the next 3, I think you have a very good shot. You lose against Georgia and then win the next 3. I'm not sure. It would be close, but I'm not sure if Alabama would have done enough to the 3 seed if they do lose to Georgia, because this is a quad 1 matchup that I think you really need to have. What other questions do you guys have? And we got over 100 people in here on Twitter. Got like 20 people in here on YouTube. Again, if you are not currently subscribed to the channel, if you could do me a favor and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Want to talk about the Georgia game too. Obviously, I know we've talked a little bit about it. But what other questions you guys have about Tennessee, about Georgia, about kind of what we look like kind of for the future? Probably going to keep going for maybe another 15, 20 minutes if y'all have enough questions. We'll also give a quick update. I have not heard a complete answer from my source/contact yet, but I reached out to a friend of mine and asked if we would be able, or if he would, if he knew what was going on as it relates to Caleb Holt. I have not gotten an answer yet. I will let you guys know as soon as I hear. What I have heard from some other people, is it sounds like what I have said all along is likely going to happen. And that's a situation where Nate Oates and Preston Murphy are not going to let Caleb Holt leave the state of Alabama without a hell of a fight, right? You had heard Travis Branham and some others. Hart asking the question. I was going into it right before you asked it, but it was kind of a situation where I think that you had heard from Travis Branham and some others that Arizona had led for Caleb Holt. And I thought that it was very telling that it was a situation where even though Caleb Holt was leading for, or Arizona was leading for Caleb Holt, you had not seen him commit anywhere. I thought that the longer this commitment drug out, actually the better place Alabama was going to be in, because I think that Arizona was trying to get it done and over quickly. I think that Alabama knew that, hey, like whatever we need to do to get him to not leave the state of Alabama is what we got to do. I think that realistically, Nate Oates and Preston Murphy are going full court press on Caleb Holt. I know y'all probably saw that Jackson Richardson put his commitment date. I would not expect it to be Alabama. I know we're in the top 4. Creighton is the name I'm hearing on that one. Like I said, would not expect that one to be Alabama. I think that was an Alabama decision, not a Jackson Richardson decision. For anybody that's curious, from what I have heard, Richardson kind of has been delaying because I think in his mind, he thought that if Caleb Holt did not go to Alabama, then he potentially would. But I think that Alabama is kind of going full steam ahead on Caleb Holt and having that be the guy who they're going after. Obviously, for good reason. He's one of the best players in the state of Alabama in quite some time. He's a guy who's just a difference maker at the guard position. He's a guy that Alabama and Nate Oates are going to have a lot of experience with, especially given the fact that Nate Oates is now going to be an assistant coach for the USA basketball team with Anthony Grant. Caleb Holt will be on that team. So there's a lot of things like that I think they're definitely working positively in Alabama's favor. So I would definitely say this one is not over yet. Likely, we will hear a decision here in the next, let's call it month or so, based on what I've heard. I think it might happen sometime in March, maybe April, but it wouldn't shock me if it happened sometime in March. I like where we stand. I know some of the inside sources, like on 3 and some others, like where we stand. Like I said, the guy who I pretty well trust on some stuff like this has not gotten back to me. So As soon as I get some information, I'll be sure to let you guys know. But as far as I know, I really like where we stand from the people that I have heard from. D Woods asking about the Caden Samuels commit. So Caden Samuels, I did a whole video on this one. If you haven't had time to check it out, it's posted on the channel when the day he committed to Alabama. This is one that I think is a really big deal. I think that it's a guy who is a really solid shooter, really solid scorer that has the length and ability that can really give the length and ability that can really go get one. You know, you saw it with Labaron Philon today. The importance of having a guy that even when everything on offense isn't working, you can just go get a bucket. I think about like what Labaron Philon was able to do at the end of the game today. I think about like that Brandon Miller 41-point game over South Carolina. When everything's going wrong, you got to have a guy that can just go get you a bucket. I think Caden Samuels gives you that. I think he also gives you a 6'7" scorer that has a really high shot. His release is crazy, crazy high. I think he has a solid wingspan where he can be a good defender. I think that he's the kind of guy where he's going to have the length and athleticism that Nate's going to get onto him on defense and kind of give him the same spiel that we hear a lot. Give me what you can on defense, and I'm going to give you the freedom on offense. And I think that if he commits on that defensive end, I think that he's going to be more than capable of helping us out in a big way. I think that he's an elite shooter. And I think that that's a big deal, right? You know, this is a guy who was one of the top scoring options in the EYBL. I think he was fourth in the country in EYBL scoring. Um, Again, the release is super high, which Alabama, loves to see with his inability to have a shot blocked. He's also a lefty shooter, which Nate Oates has had a propensity to really, really enjoy. And it's something that I think that having a lefty 3-point shooter on occasion really throws the defense off because they're so used to everybody being righties. So I will say that that is something that's kind of funny to me, but I do think that he's a really, really good scoring wing. And I think that he's a guy that really is going to be able to get his shot from day one because I think what he has is the body. And the best way I can describe it is think about what Amari Allen has today for you. He has the body and the physicality where he doesn't get pushed off his spot the same. Not all freshmen are the same based on what they come in and what their body looks like, how physical they're able to be. And I mean, even think about like a Aiden Holloway last season versus this season, right? Aiden's put a lot of work in on his body in the offseason to be able to play through contact. I thought that Aiden was able to do things today in this basketball game against Tennessee that he wouldn't have been able to do last season. I think the physicality and the strength that he put on in the offseason really allowed him to play through contact more. And I think that Caden Samuels has some of that body today, right? And I think that's a big deal. When you can have that coming into college, it means the impact you can have as a freshman is larger, right? And I think that's the big deal is because when you're looking at these freshmen, you want somebody that can have an impact day one, and because those are the freshmen you want to go after, and then you want to fill in some of the rest of your guys from transfer portal. Nate wants to kind of fill, some returners, some transfer, some freshmen. Can Anthony Grant give Nate some tips on defense without teaching him about the tale of two halves? I don't know if you can see it right there, right behind the picture of me and my fiance, is actually the Avery. Here, let me grab it. 1 second. Is the Coach Avery Johnson bobblehead from when I was in college. We had a bobblehead night, and so it has his this is Alabama basketball, buckle up. Um, Avery Johnson bobblehead, and so it's kind of my running joke for the tale of two halves. That I have to get Avery Johnson to help us out with that. But yeah, no, I mean, in general, I definitely think that there's going to be some defensive things that I'm sure Nate's going to be able to learn from a guy like Anthony Grant. I think that there's also situations where um, I think that I think that there's a couple of things that Nate's going to have to realize. And it's something that I want to workshop and I want to kind of talk through with some other people, but I can kind of generally give my opening thoughts here before I, do a deeper dive into this. Is I think that Nate's defensive philosophy currently has to do with what works in the NBA. because he's bringing in some NBA guys that have that NBA experience and they're helping him with what works in the NBA. And I think at times it works in college, but I think that today is like a great example of the game that you saw played today between Alabama and Tennessee would never have been allowed at the NBA level, right? Like they're never going to allow people to have a hold of the jerseys and hold like they did or have guys in the paint for as long as they did, without 3-second calls and stuff like that, right? Like the freedom of motion and the freedom of how the game is played is just different at the NBA level. And I know that Nate is trying to get his guys prepared for the NBA. People talk about Alabama as the 31st NBA franchise. You've heard some of those nomenclatures out there and some different things. And I think that that is good and all, right? I think that it's reason why a guy like Amari Allen and Labaron Philon and all these guys come to Alabama because they want to play in that NBA style system. They want to be ready for the NBA when they go to the draft. And so I think it's a big deal. And I think it's a very, very important thing. And it's a big recruiting tool for Alabama. But I also think that at times there are some things that are allowed in college or are not called in college that some of the better defenses do, or some of the better rebounding teams do. Think about your Houstons, your Tennessees of the world, right? Like there's some things that these teams do on a game in, game out basis that allow them to be the better defenses and the better rebounding teams. And not to say Alabama needs to do all of them, but Alabama probably should consider doing some of them. And a lot of it is things that you learn in August and things that you learn in July, not things that you're going to put in today in February. So I think that's very important, right? I think some people look at, oh, what is my game plan for this game, right? Like at a certain point, your game plan has to center around what you've practiced all off season and what you've prepared all off season. You can't just change everything because it's not working. So I think that some of these things it's kind of the whole, point that I talked about earlier with Latrell Wrightsell. We could point to last, that Final Four run. Latrell Wrightsell got hurt middle of that season with the concussion, and Mark Sears and Aaron Estrada had to play just crazy minutes, and their legs were just dead. They were absolutely dead. They were playing 40-minute games nonstop, and their legs were dead by the end of the season. And Nate thought that loss to Florida that allowed Alabama to get a bunch of rest before the NCAA tournament helped them prepare for their defense, get more rested and healthy, and then go on the run they went on. I think this is right. My reason I bring that up is it's not like Alabama could have just been like, oh, I need more shooters. Like, I need more ball handlers. Like, I just didn't want to grab one out of thin air, right? That's not realistically a thing you can do. I thought that Nate tried that, with seeing if Bediako potentially could get eligibility. And I think that's a whole different discussion. I still look at a guy like what LSU just had commit out of the NBL in Australia. I think that the fact that you have a guy from NBL in Australia that's played 4 years, is 22 years old, and now he's going to get 4 years of eligibility in college. Um, to me, that seems like there's something off there. If you want to give me the argument that somebody that's 15 to 18 years old in that high school age in the US, but this person is an abroad foreigner and they're playing professional minor league basketball, basically, pro basketball, but it's really the minor leagues. Sure. I'll listen to that argument because you're just giving me the argument that the sports is not tied to the education like it is here in the US. And I think that that's a valid argument. However, if you're going to tell me that somebody's 22 years old and has been playing on the A League team of a professional league in a foreign country for 4 years, and now they're going to be able to play 4 years of college basketball, I just disagree with that sentiment. I disagree that you're being equitable across what it looks like. And so I think that's where the NCAA is going to have to look at what this is. The reason I bring this up is I thought that Nate saw a spot on his team where it's like, hey, we could use a backup center, right? Noah has not been what we thought he would be, and we could really use some help. Charles Bediako obviously was interested because he knew the NIL opportunities were better than what it was when he was there. His body, the weight thing that Nate talked about, there's been a lot of things I think that went with that. And I think that Bediako was like, if there's some world in which I could play, then let's do it. And so I think that Nate did the best he could to bring somebody in the midseason, right? I look at like what Oklahoma did, and I forget the guy who it was they grabbed. Let me grab his name. Um, Oklahoma got Kirill Alontiv. The first game that he played was against Mississippi Valley State on the 29th of December. He's from Russia and he played in the Russian basketball league. And they brought him in the midseason. And now, against Florida, he played 18 minutes. He played 19 against Alabama. He's a guy who they brought in midseason because they thought they needed another center. And so they bring in somebody that can really help. I think that Alabama was doing the same thing. They just did it from a guy who had played in college before, right? Same general philosophy. Hey, we have a spot on our team that we potentially need to fill, and we know this guy can fill it. Let's bring him in. So I think that Nate did the best he could in that standpoint. But I think that the reason I bring all this up is I think this is a point where you're just going to point to the fact that Nate's going to have to learn what he needs to do differently from a defensive perspective and what he also needs to do differently from a personnel perspective. And I think that personnel perspective is going to be a big one. I think that he's done a lot more about getting longer wings. I think what Duke was able to do to us last season really is part of the reason why you brought in some of the guys you brought in, like a Taylor Bowen, like a Jalil Bethea, right? You brought in some lengthier guys. Obviously, Bethea had the injury and stuff, played an impact on why he's not been the guy who you thought he might be this season. I think that there's going to be more that will come in the future, but I think that that's the big thing that Nate is going to kind of look to for next season, building the roster is you need some additional depth in the front court, whether that means you bring in a big four that's going to play the four and play the five, whether that means you're going to bring in an additional center that's just going to play the, true backup role that's really not going to play much in a lot of games. Whatever the case that might be, I think that's the big answer for Alabama this season is how they're going to build the roster. And obviously, hopefully, you get some injury luck because that has a lot to do with it. Are we talking about this team in the same way if you potentially have Keaton Bristow and Collins Onjiaka available? Maybe not, because I think that Keaton Bristow would have been a guy that at a minimum could have played a semi Grant Nelson role. I don't think he would have been as good of a 3-point shooter. I don't think he would have had as much as Grant gave you his senior year, of course. But I think that he may have been able to give you a guy that had some solid rebounding and defense and could have potentially played in a Tennessee game or a Florida game that could have given you something. Additionally, again, I'm not of the mindset Collins would have changed a ton, but could he have given you 5 or 6 minutes in that game? Sure, right. So I think that that's kind of the mindset that I look at it as is I think we would think a little bit differently about this team if Collins and Keaton weren't both hurt. But if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, then we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So like I don't know what else to say. What are the last couple of questions you guys have? Not going to keep going for too much longer, but we got a bunch of you guys in here, so wanted to answer any other questions y'all might have before I get out of here. As always, if y'all aren't currently subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and subscribe over on YouTube, Barnes on Bama. We do episodes at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. I do these live streams as often as I can, but I am in attendance for all the home games, so usually I just have to do them after I get home or whatever. So, what other questions do you guys have? Since we did do this episode to serve as a little bit of a preview of that Georgia game, what I'm probably going to do is I might do a short record tomorrow, just breaking down the Georgia game, giving my official thoughts and getting the prediction out. But it will not be a long episode. If I do, it'll maybe be like 15 minutes or so, just a short, Georgia preview of the game because, like I said, I know we talked about it a little bit in this one. Give my prediction. I will say I do think that I can give you kind of a little bit of early sneak peek here. I do think Alabama wins the game. I think the Alabama, there is the idea that Alabama Nate Oates has struggled a little bit on the road in Athens. I think that's a little overplayed. I think that Alabama does a good job playing against teams that are that fast paced offense. And I don't think that Georgia has anything that truly scares me. I think Santos Real is a really good guy, and I think that he's a really good player down low. But I do think that Aiden Sherrill is potentially going to be able to match up with him. And I think that when you look at what Georgia has done this season, um, they've been a team that has pushed the pace. They lost 92-77 to A&M in a game in which A&M shot 13 of 34. Um, and Georgia only turned over the basketball 10 times. A&M even turned it over 14 times. That was a game where A&M was able to get 32 defensive rebounds. I think it's a situation where I just don't know that Georgia is quite the dominant team when they go up against teams that are really able to run with them. I mean, even Oklahoma scored 94 points in just 63 possessions. I think that at times Georgia has struggled this season, getting the pace up. And even when the pace isn't up, if you're able to run your offense, Oklahoma shoots 14 of 25 from three, is super efficient inside the arc at, 19 of 31 for 61%. Georgia at times has just really struggled. And that was a game where Oklahoma didn't really even do anything super crazy. They didn't dominate them on the glass. They didn't dominate them from assists or turnovers. Oklahoma just shot the ball well, and Georgia has been receptive to giving up some of that this season. So, early thoughts. I do think Alabama probably wins this game. I think they match up really well with Georgia. That's the type of team that Alabama generally does well with. So, I do think Alabama wins the game, but I'll have to do some additional deep dive to see what I think my score is going to be. I want to see Bowl get his 3-point shot to fall. He's been in a slump. Granted, he's been in and out of the lineup. What's my thoughts? Yeah, I think that what you just said right there is my thoughts. I think that a big part of why Taylor Bull Bowen has struggled from the 3-point line this season is that he has been out of the lineup so much, right? Taylor Bull Bowen has missed games on 4 different occasions, and like in the Florida game, he played just 2 minutes. Then he was out for the A&M, 7 minutes against Auburn, just 15 against Ole Miss. Doesn't play again. 10 against Arkansas. There's been a long stretch of games in which he just has not been himself. Also, I think that when you look at what his 3-point numbers currently look like, the one game in which he took a decent number of threes was that Tennessee game. He was 1 of 6 in that first matchup. And he was coming off of a not playing and then a 14-minute game against Oklahoma, in which he had 4 fouls, right? Like 4 fouls in 14 minutes is just not Taylor Bull Bowen. I think that this is a lot of Taylor just not being able to get into a real rhythm, not being able to get into a real flow. I think that you even look at a guy, another shooter on the team that went through something similar. Look at Latrell Wrightsell this season. Latrell Wrightsell now is up to 37% shooting, but when Latrell Wrightsell, he doesn't play for 4 games from Gonzaga through Clemson. The UTSA game, his first game back, he goes 2 of 14. If you take out those 14 attempts, Latrell Wrightsell is, shooting almost 40% almost 50% from threes, like mid 40s from three, right? So it's a situation where I just think that not being able to be in a rhythm for a shooter, whether it be a shooter like Latrell Wrightsell or a shooter like Taylor Bull Bowen that really are rhythm guys, I think that obviously different positions, different shots, different skill sets, but I still think that when you're not playing in live action, when you're not playing out there with the guys in practice and making sure like where the pass needs to be, when the pass needs to be. I think that's kind of a perfect situation of Taylor getting hit in the shoulder today with the basketball, right? I think that that's just not being locked in with your guys and knowing exactly when the ball should be coming, right? Like Amari Allen did a normal push ahead pass that we see every game for Alabama, right? You saw it in this game against Tennessee where we pushed it ahead to the corner and Trelly hits a 3 in the corner. Amari Allen does a little push to Taylor, and he gets hit in the shoulder and he goes out of bounds. I think that that's just Taylor not being fully, I say locked in, but what I mean by that is like not fully up to speed where he's like been practicing 100% for the past, 3 weeks and he knows absolutely everything. you know the cut that your guy's going to make before he makes it because you've practiced it 40 times or 100 times, right? Like I think that's what Taylor's been missing. And additionally with that, like maybe he wants to pass lower or higher or whatever, and right? And it's just I think there's a lot of things that go into basketball that you just don't always see, whether it be how somebody passes the basketball, when somebody passes the basketball, in what action, where you like to be on the floor, whether you're a wing guy, corner guy, whatever. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. And then when you combine that with the fact that he hasn't shot the ball a ton, and then he's missed so many different games, I think that even what you also need to understand is just because somebody is playing in the basketball game does not mean that they are practicing at the same level prior to that playing. I think that Labaron Philon's a great example. And in this game, I'm sure he did some live action stuff, but I doubt that Labaron Philon was fully practiced as if he was 100% good coming into this game, right? Like, so I think that there's some situations like that where you kind of have to understand that the timing is just if it's just enough off, it will throw off your shot. And I think that's kind of the situation we've seen with Taylor this season. Um, do I hope that he gets a lot better? Yeah. If he stays healthy, I think that he will. And I think that when you play some guys in March Madness, I think Taylor's a great example of when you play against a March Madness where they're going to give some freedom of movement, give them some freedom of ability. I think that some guys with some more athleticism and skill sets like Taylor are going to be way more able and capable to be able to play. And I think that they're going to be able to give a lot to you. All right. I know there's 130 people in here. Really quick, as I said, if you are not currently subscribed to the YouTube channel, if you could do me a favor and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter because I am going to do a full pregame write up before the Alabama Georgia game. We'll break down all of Georgia, all the players they've got, all the players that they bring in, kind of what they do well as a team, what they don't do well as a team. That will come out the morning of the Georgia game, both on my Twitter and on my website. If you are not aware of the website, if you'll see down below, barnesonbama.com is where you can find all the written content. Like I said, I know a ton of you guys here are watching on Twitter. So if you're watching on Twitter, if you'll just send lookout for that, that's going to come out on Tuesday morning. Additionally, I think that this is a huge game for Alabama. I know that Thomas said it earlier. I'll throw it back up. Georgia's a quad one opportunity. You win this game, you win the next two. I think that you have a real shot to be a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think you win the next four, you're absolutely, meaning you beat Georgia, beat Auburn, and win the first two in the SEC. No matter what happens in the championship game, I think you're probably a 3 seed. Realistically, I think you got to win 3 of 4 to be a 3 seed. 4 of 4, I think you're a lock. And so I think this is a situation where Georgia is a huge opportunity for this team. This is a place where, again, Alabama has at times struggled, but I think that Alabama plays well against a team like Georgia, given the pace they play with, given the style they play with. So I do think that Alabama will be successful in this game. Um, but nevertheless, like I said, I'm going to do a full write up of this game tomorrow. I will have a short, like I said, maybe 15 minutes that's going to come out talking about this one. Nothing too crazy. If you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it, and all you guys being in here makes the stream go by so much faster. But I will catch y'all in the next episode.